All right, let's jump right in, ready to go deep on
It was
APIs.
exciting.
I know, APIs sounds kind of tech heavy, right?
Yeah.
But you would not believe how much they actually, touch our daily lives.
It really is true.
And to help us unpack all of this, we have this really awesome article. It's called What is an API? APIs Explained in Simple Terms
Oh, yeah.
by HR.
Really good one.
Think of it this way. Have you ever, wondered how apps on your phone are able to just, pull information, like weather updates or, if you need a recipe for dinner?
Yeah.
That's APIs at work.
Like magic, right?
It's like magic, but we're going to break down how it works. And this article really helps.
It lays the foundation so, well, most people, they don't realize how many times a day they're interacting with systems that they completely rely on APIs.
Right. So to kick things off, the article uses this really clever analogy, and I love a good analogy.
I do too.
It's the restaurant waiter.
Oh, yeah.
You go to a restaurant, you tell the waiter what you want, they go back to the kitchen, and then boom, your food shows up.
Exactly.
You don't need to know the recipe, how to cook it, all that stuff. And that's exactly how an API works. So it acts as this intermediary.
Yeah, it handles that communication between different software applications.
Yeah.
Takes your request, fetches that information, delivers it back to you.
All without you having to even understand, what's going on in the background.
The complexity.
The complexity, exactly. Okay, so that analogy really, kind of helps me, really click, oh, I see what's going on here.
The light bulb moment.
Yes, exactly. So they're like the invisible messengers,
Very
making
good.
sure everything runs smoothly in this digital world.
Absolutely.
But let's break it down a little bit more, what they actually do.
Okay.
The article highlights 4 key uses of APIs, and it starts with data retrieval.
Okay, so think about this. When you check your weather app on your phone,
Right.
your phone doesn't have its own weather station.
All right.
It gets that data from a third-party API,
It's true.
like one provided by a weather service.
Yeah, so it's like allowing that app to tap into this huge pool of data
Yeah, massive amount of data.
that it wouldn't otherwise have.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this applies to so much more than weather. You got APIs for recipes, for lyrics, for stock prices.
Oh, wow.
Really, it's incredible.
It's like a universal key to unlock all this information.
It is. It's a great way to put it.
Okay.
Now, moving beyond just pulling data, APIs also play a crucial role in just simplifying complex tasks for developers.
Okay.
This is where the idea of abstraction comes in.
Okay. So, I'm a visual person, so what does that look like?
So imagine you are trying to build a really complex app from scratch.
Right.
Developers would have to worry about every little detail, how to connect to the internet, how to display things on the screen,
Wow.
access different hardware components. It would be a nightmare.
Right.
But with APIs, developers can use these pre-built functions.
Right.
It's like ordering off a menu. They just specify what they need,
Right.
and the API handles the rest
Wow. So instead of reinventing the wheel
every time.
every time, you just have this,
Exactly.
this thing that does it for you, and then they can focus on all the cool stuff that makes their app unique.
Precisely. And this level of abstraction is so essential for really driving innovation. It allows developers to build these really sophisticated applications in a fraction of the time without having to be an expert on every single underlying technology.
Right. And it's interesting, too, because we're talking about APIs and pulling this data and, kind of simplifying these tasks.
Yeah.
But it's they're really the foundation of this entire process.
They are.
Okay. So our next API superpower is all about expansion. It's extending the capabilities of existing platforms.
Okay.
So, you can add widgets to your home screen, or how voice assistants like Siri or Alexa can control your smart home devices.
Right. Perfect examples.
So that's all APIs.
All those integrations made possible by APIs.
Oh,
Developers can essentially plug their apps into these platforms, leverage all those existing functionalities to just create a richer user experience.
yeah. So it's like creating an ecosystem where different apps and services can all talk to each other.
You got it. You got it. And that interconnectedness,
Yeah.
that is only possible because of APIs.
Okay.
They're the glue.
Wow, the glue.
It was holding this whole digital landscape together.
All right. So we've got data retrieval, abstraction, expansion. What is our 4th and final API superpower?
This one might not be as obvious, but it's so important. APIs as gatekeepers of data.
Oh, okay.
So think about all that sensitive information that's on your phone.
Right.
Your location, your contacts, your microphone access.
Right.
Apps need your permission to access that, right?
Yeah, you get those pop-up messages all the time, like, hey, can I use your
Is
location?
he
And
accessing your camera?
exactly. And those permission requests are all managed through APIs.
Hmm.
They're acting as these intermediaries, ensuring that apps can't just access your data without you saying, yes, you can. So they're like a line of defense, like protecting our privacy.
Absolutely. Think of it this way. The operating system on your phone, that's like a heavily guarded fortress,
Yeah.
and the API is the gatekeeper, controlling who gets in and what they can access.
Oh, I like that.
Right. So it's not just about APIs making things work smoothly. It's about them safeguarding our data.
Right. But I mean, as we saw with that Cambridge Analytica
Oh,
case,
yeah.
it can be misused.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. It's an important point to remember. APIs are essential for protecting our data, but they can be exploited,
Oh, for sure.
which is why being really aware of the permissions that you're granting to these different apps, that's so important.
Right. So it's not just about the API, it's how it's used and how we're interacting with it.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
this gatekeeper role,
Yeah.
it's a big responsibility.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay. So we've got all this going on with APIs,
We do.
lots of responsibility,
Yes.
but also they're kind of doing all this magic in the background, making our lives easier.
They are. They are.
All right. Well, let's.
And that actually leads us perfectly into our next point.
Okay. Let's hear it.
No lie.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like this constant, like, balance, right, between convenience and security.
Exactly.
On one hand, we want all our apps to work and have the info they need.
Oh.
But on the other, I don't want to just give away all my data without, like, thinking.
Exactly. And part of finding that balance is understanding how these permissions actually work.
Yeah.
When you see that pop up asking if an app can use your location,
Right.
it's not just a random request. There's an API working behind the scenes, acting as that gatekeeper that we were talking about.
Okay, so how can we be more, like, mindful about these permissions? Like, is it just, like, deny everything?
Not necessarily. Think of it this way.
Okay.
You wouldn't give your house key to just anyone, would you?
Right. No.
You'd want to know who they are and why they needed it.
Hmm.
Same thing with your digital data.
So it's about being more intentional with the permissions we're giving out.
Exactly. Instead of just blindly clicking allow,
Right.
we should actually pause and consider, does this app truly need that permission to do its job?
Like a navigation app.
Makes sense.
It needs my location
Exactly.
to give me
Yeah,
directions.
but does a calculator app need to see all your contacts?
Right. Probably not.
Probably not.
Okay. So it's about understanding, like, the potential implications of what I'm giving. It's my data. I should be in control.
Exactly. Absolutely. And this brings up a broader point about this whole API ecosystem and how it impacts privacy.
Right.
It's not just about us as individual users being careful, but it's also about the companies, the developers that are actually building these systems
Right.
with a privacy-first mindset.
So are you saying that developers have, like, a responsibility
Yeah.
to design APIs in a way that, like, minimizes data collection and gives users more control?
I am, exactly. We need to move beyond just meeting like the minimum legal requirements and start really thinking about the ethical implications, like designing APIs with privacy as a core principle. That should be the norm,
Right.
not the exception.
So it's a cultural shift.
It is.
Yeah.
We need to get to a point where privacy is considered a fundamental right in this digital world,
Right.
not just something tacked on as an afterthought.
Right. And APIs are, like, in the middle of all that.
They are. They're at the heart of it. Think about it. The way that APIs are designed, that dictates how that data is accessed, shared, and used.
Right.
So if we build those systems with privacy in mind, it ripples outwards.
So it's not just about, like, protecting ourselves from risks,
Right.
but actually leveraging this power of APIs to, like, build a more privacy-conscious world.
Exactly. And there's some really interesting developments happening in this space. For example, some companies are exploring this concept of privacy-preserving APIs.
Privacy-preserving APIs, what is that?
Okay, so essentially it's about allowing developers to access the insights they need from data, but without actually seeing the underlying personal information.
Okay.
So it's like being able to analyze trends in health data
Right.
without knowing the identities of the individual.
Oh, that sounds like a game changer for privacy.
It has the potential to be. It's still early days, but this type of innovation really shows how APIs can be a force for good in this whole data privacy landscape.
Yeah, like flipping the script.
Exactly.
Instead of looking at it as a potential vulnerability. It's like enhancing privacy.
Absolutely. And this brings us to a really crucial point about the different types of APIs that exist.
Okay.
We've been talking about them in a general sense, but not all APIs are created equal.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
What are the different like flavors of APIs that we should know about?
All right. So some of the most common ones you'll hear about are REST, SOAP, and GraphQL.
Okay.
Each has its own strengths and weaknesses.
Okay, yeah, walk me through that.
All right. So let's start with REST, which stands for Representational State Transfer.
Okay.
It's probably the most popular architectural style for APIs today, known for its simplicity and flexibility. REST APIs use standard HTTP methods like GET, POST, PUT, and DELETE
Okay.
to interact with data.
So it's like using a common language that most systems can understand.
Exactly. REST APIs are great for retrieving, manipulating data, and they're widely supported by various programming languages.
Makes sense. What about SOAP?
So SOAP, which stands for Simple Object Access Protocol, is a bit older than REST.
Okay.
And it tends to be a little more complex. It relies on XML for data exchange and often requires more upfront setup and configuration.
So it's a bit more like heavyweight.
You can see that, yeah, SOAP is often used in enterprise environments.
Right.
Where security and reliability are paramount.
Okay.
But it can be a bit more cumbersome for simpler applications.
Right. Okay. And what about GraphQL? That's a newer one, right?
That is GraphQL is a newer query language for APIs that Facebook developed.
Okay.
It's designed to be more efficient, more flexible than REST, allowing clients to request only the data they need.
Oh.
Without overfetching unnecessary information.
So it's like instead of getting the whole menu,
Right.
I can just order what I want.
Exactly.
Okay.
GraphQL is great for situations where you need precise control over that data that you're fetching. And it's becoming increasingly popular in these modern web and mobile applications.
This is so interesting. It's like this whole world of API architecture
It is.
that I didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
And so the choice of which one to use kind of depends on the situation.
Absolutely. Depends on the specific needs of that application and the developers building it.
It's like choosing the right tool for the job.
Exactly. But regardless of which type of API is being used,
Right.
security is always a top concern.
Always a top concern, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about security.
Okay.
What are API keys and how do they help with security?
All right. So think of an API key as a unique identifier
Okay.
that's assigned to a specific application or user.
Okay.
It's like a badge
Okay.
that says, hey, I'm allowed to access this API.
Right.
When an application makes a request
Yeah.
to an API, it includes its API key in the request header.
Okay.
And the API server can then verify that key
Right.
to make sure that request is coming from a legitimate source.
So it's like a security checkpoint.
It is. It is, making sure only authorized apps can get through that gate.
Okay, so that's API keys, but then there's also authentication.
Yes.
So how does that fit in?
So authentication, that goes a step further
Okay.
by verifying the identity of the user or the application.
So it's not just having the key, it's proving who you are.
Exactly. Exactly. Authentication often involves usernames and passwords, but can also include more advanced methods
Right.
like two-factor authentication or biometric scans.
So you've got the key, you're authenticated.
Right.
Then what is authorization?
So authorization determines what actions that authenticated user or
Right.
application is allowed to perform.
So it's like different levels of access.
It is. It's like having different levels of access within a building.
Yeah, like I might have the key to the building, but I can't get into every room.
Exactly. Exactly. Authorization makes sure that even authenticated users can only access and modify the data they are authorized to.
It's like multi-layered security for APIs.
It is. And it's an ongoing process. As technology evolves, new threats emerge. Developers need to constantly adapt and update their security practices.
It's a lot
It is.
to stay ahead of, the bad guys.
Yeah. It's like a constant arms race.
It is, but there are resources out there
There are.
that can help developers build those secure APIs.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's like having this whole community of experts all working together
Right.
to make this digital world a safer place.
That makes sense. Okay, so we're getting into some of the more technical aspects of API security.
Why are?
But one thing that we haven't touched on is versioning.
Okay.
So in the world of APIs, why is that such a big deal?
All right. So as APIs evolve over time, developers often need to make changes.
Makes sense. Got to keep things updated.
Right. Add new features, fix bugs, update those security protocols. But the challenge is these changes can sometimes break existing applications
Right.
that rely on the older version.
Right, so it's like you change the locks on your house and suddenly everyone with the old key is locked out.
Exactly, exactly. And that's where versioning comes in, by assigning a specific version number.
Okay.
To each iteration of an API, developers can ensure that those older applications
Right,
continue to function
right.
while allowing those newer applications to take advantage of those latest features.
So it's about compatibility,
Yes,
but also allowing for innovation and progress.
precisely. And there are different strategies for versioning APIs,
Okay.
each with its own pros and cons. But that key goal is to minimize disruption for those existing users,
Right.
while still allowing that API to evolve over time.
It's a delicate balance,
It is,
but important.
but crucial for building that robust and reliable API ecosystem.
Right, and this kind of all ties back into API management,
It does.
which we were talking about earlier. So, like, what is API management?
It's all about ensuring that APIs are well-designed, well-documented,
Yeah.
secure, and easy to use.
So it's like a whole discipline.
It is. And
Yeah.
it's becoming increasingly important as APIs become more central to the way businesses operate.
So it's not just building them.
Right.
It's managing them.
It's the entire life cycle.
The entire life cycle. Okay, so what does that look like?
So API management, that encompasses a wide range of activities: design, development, testing, deployment, security, monitoring, versioning, documentation.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot.
It is.
That's a whole team of people
Often there is.
that make this happen.
Yeah. And there are also specialized tools
Wow.
and platforms
Wow.
that help organizations manage their APIs more effectively.
So it's like a control center
You could say that.
for this API ecosystem.
Exactly. And as APIs become more integrated into these business processes,
Right.
API management, it's just becoming even more crucial.
Speaking of business, you mentioned that APIs, play a role in how businesses operate. Can you, expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely. We've been talking about APIs from this very technical perspective,
Right.
but they have a significant impact on the business world.
So, how do they actually, factor into business strategies?
So one of the most significant trends is the rise of these API economies.
API economies, that's a new one.
Yeah, that's essentially the idea that businesses can leverage APIs to create new revenue streams, partnerships, and business models.
So it's not just using it internally, but, exposing it.
Exactly, opening it up to external partners
Okay.
and even the public. By doing that, by opening up those APIs to others,
Right.
they create new opportunities for innovation and collaboration.
Give me some, real-world examples of that.
Okay, so one common model is this API as a product approach.
Okay.
Companies like Twilio and Stripe, they've built successful businesses by offering APIs that provide access to their core services,
Right.
like communication and payment processing. Developers can integrate these APIs into their own applications,
Right.
create a seamless user experience.
So they're selling access to their infrastructure.
Precisely. And it's a win-win.
Right.
The API provider, they generate revenue, and that developer, they get access to powerful tools without having to build everything themselves.
Right. So it's like this symbiotic relationship
Exact-
where everybody benefits.
Absolutely. And beyond direct revenue generation,
Right.
APIs can be used to foster partnerships, expand into new markets.
How so?
Imagine a company wants to offer their services in a new country.
Right.
Instead of building a whole new infrastructure from scratch, they could partner with a local company,
Right.
integrate their systems through APIs,
Right.
leverage each other's strengths,
Mm.
reach a wider audience.
Wow. That's a really, smart approach.
It is.
Yeah.
And that interconnectedness, that's one of the key hallmarks of this API economy.
Right.
By facilitating that collaboration, that data sharing. APIs are breaking down these traditional silos and creating new opportunities for growth and innovation.
It's so interesting to think that APIs can have such a huge impact.
Yes.
Not just in the tech world.
Across all industries.
Across all industries.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as APIs continue to evolve,
Right.
they'll become even more central to the way businesses operate and interact with each other.
Wow. It's like the foundation of this whole new digital economy.
You could say that. And one of the most exciting areas of innovation
Okay.
in this whole API landscape is the emergence of serverless computing.
Okay, so we touched on serverless a little bit earlier,
Yes.
but I'm still a little bit fuzzy on what that means
Okay.
and how it relates to APIs.
So traditional application development that often involves setting up and managing servers to host your code.
Right.
But with serverless computing, developers can outsource that infrastructure management
Right.
to cloud providers like Amazon, Google, or Microsoft.
So it's like I'm renting an apartment instead of owning a house.
Perfect analogy.
I don't have to worry about all the maintenance and upkeep.
Exactly, exactly. And that's where APIs come in. In a serverless world, APIs become even more crucial
Okay.
because they're the primary way that developers interact with those cloud services.
So instead of managing servers, I'm managing APIs.
In a way, yes. You write your code as these small, self-contained functions,
Okay.
and then you use APIs to trigger those functions and connect them to other services.
So I'm like breaking down my app into little building blocks
Exactly.
and then using APIs to like assemble them.
Exactly. And that gives developers so much flexibility and scalability.
Wow.
They can spin up new functions on demand,
Wow.
only paying for the resources that they actually use.
So it's more efficient.
It can be.
Yeah.
It can be, and it's also a lot faster without that overhead of server management.
Right?
Developers can focus on writing code and delivering value to users.
It sounds like this could really change how software is developed.
It absolutely does. And as serverless architectures become more prevalent, APIs will play an even more central role in the way that those applications are built, deployed, and managed.
It's like APIs are becoming the language of the cloud.
You could say that they're the common language
Yeah.
that allows developers to really tap into these vast resources
Right.
and capabilities of these platforms.
This is so exciting.
It is. It is.
I feel like we're like witnessing a huge shift in how everything is done.
We are. And as with any major technological shift,
Right.
there will be challenges
Of course.
and opportunities along the way.
Yeah.
But one thing is clear. APIs will be at the forefront of this evolution.
Wow. It's amazing to think that like this little piece of code, an API, can have such a huge impact.
It is. It all comes down to that power of interconnectivity.
Right.
By allowing different systems to communicate and share information,
Right.
APIs are just unlocking these new possibilities
Okay.
for innovation, collaboration, and growth.
They're like breaking down barriers and building bridges in this whole digital world.
Exactly. And as we continue to explore this vast potential of APIs,
Right.
I think we'll just be amazed
Yeah.
by what we can achieve together.
I think you're right. Yeah, it's pretty amazing to think about something that seems so simple, like an API can have such a huge impact on how we live and work and just interact with like the world around us.
You know, it really is a testament to the power of innovation.
Yeah.
And the ingenuity of developers who are constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
I mean, when we first started talking about APIs,
Yeah.
I kind of had this image in my mind, these really rigid technical specifications.
I get that.
But like this deep dive has made me realize that they're so versatile.
Right.
And their potential to like really shape the future
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things I find so fascinating about APIs.
Yeah.
They're not just static pieces of code.
Right.
They're constantly evolving,
Yeah.
adapting to new challenges and opportunities.
And that's happening like on so many levels,
Yeah.
The types of APIs that are being developed, like how they're being used, managed.
Exactly. We've seen the emergence of new architectural styles like GraphQL, the rise of API economies, the importance of API management, that disruptive potential of serverless computing.
It's like a lot's changing.
It really is. The whole landscape is shifting.
Yeah.
And that rapid pace of change can be both exciting and a bit daunting.
I bet.
For developers, it means constantly having to learn and adapt to these new technologies and best practices.
Right. But it also means that, like, it's never boring.
It's true.
There's always something new happening.
Yeah, it's never a dull moment in the world of APIs.
No.
Always something to explore, something to build, something to discover.
That makes sense.
And that's what makes this field so dynamic and engaging. It's not just about writing code. It's about solving problems, connecting people, creating these new possibilities.
One thing that has really like stuck with me
Yeah.
throughout this whole conversation is how APIs are so good at like enabling this interconnectedness.
They are.
It's like they're weaving this intricate web
It's a good way to think about it.
that links all these different systems and apps and services.
And that web is constantly expanding,
right?
creating these new pathways for data to flow and for innovation to just flourish.
Like, are we watching like a whole new kind of like digital ecosystem being born
I think you're right.
that's more interconnected,
Right.
more collaborative, and
Yeah.
more accessible than ever before?
I think you're right on the money there.
Okay.
APIs are really those fundamental building blocks
Yeah.
of this ecosystem.
So we're wrapping up our deep dive.
Okay.
What's like the one big thing you want our listeners to like remember about the future of APIs?
I think the biggest takeaway here is that APIs are so much more than just these technical tools.
Okay.
They're catalysts for change. They're enablers of progress. And they're really the architects of this digital world
Oh,
that we're all building
I
together.
love.
By understanding how APIs work
Right.
and embracing their potential,
Yeah.
we can shape a future that's more connected, more innovative, and more empowering for everyone.
So well said. That's the perfect note to wrap up our
It
conversation.
really is.
So to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this incredible journey into
Yeah.
this world of APIs.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep pushing those boundaries of what's possible. Until next time.